The cap casualties have begun as Dane Jackson is no longer a Carolina Panther. The Panthers have also added some new staff members, and I'm going to answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter at Julian Council, because on Fridays, like today, I'm answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions all throughout the offseason. So here's what you need to do. Either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for next week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. We're going to get into the weekly Friday mailbag momentarily, but there is some Panthers news to go over as there's been some new staff hires, and the news earlier today on Friday that Dane Jackson is no longer a Carolina Panther. And let's go back to last month when I put out my off-season to-do list, something I've done the last couple of off-seasons here on the show. I'll go throughout the off-season and go back and look at what boxes they've checked, what boxes they have not checked, as we look to see what Carolina is going to do to try to rebuild the team each season in the off-season. And one of those checklists to do things was to go out there and to cut Dane Jackson, as he was, well, abysmal for Carolina last season. Dan Morgan had pounded the table back when Dane Jackson was sitting there in the 7th round, and the Buffalo Bills obliged and took him in the draft, and he ended up being a solid number 3 corner for them, who had to come in and start some pretty important games in the playoffs the last couple of years for Buffalo. And the hope was that in his second contract, getting a chance to be a true full-time starter, that Dane Jackson would build off of those experiences and be a valuable asset opposite of J.C. Horn here in Carolina. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Had a hamstring injury back in training camp that was significant enough for him to miss the first 6 weeks of the season. In the meantime, the Carolina Panthers went out there and traded their 7th-round pick, Michael Barrett, over to Seattle for Mike Jackson, who ended up playing and starting in all 17 games, playing 99% of the snaps this past season at that outside cornerback spot. If you look at it, when Carolina moved on from Dante Jackson, knowing that the time was over for him in Carolina, that they did not want to give him that roster bonus, they ended up getting their starting corner in that trade. Now, it was Michael Barrett, and, well, it's a 7th-round pick, and it was Deontay Johnson that they got. That 7th-round pick, of course, became Michael Barrett, who they traded for Mike Jackson. So things ended up working out for them. It wasn't Dane Jackson, but it was Mike Jackson. There was still a Jackson playing at corner for Carolina this past season. Just was not a D Jackson. It was an M Jackson instead, as Mike Jackson did play pretty well considering what expectations should have been once they traded for him back in August to come in and to take over for Dane Jackson until he was able to come back. But eventually he held on to that job. Looking back at Dane Jackson's just stats and numbers from PFF, Pro Football Focus, his PFF grade overall was at 33.8. And that was abysmal. 215th out of 223 cornerbacks to play in the NFL this past season. That's not what you're looking for. Coverage grade was a slightly better, but still not very good at all. 36.4, those 212th out of 223 corners, again, who played in the National Football League this past season. And looking at the cap savings at overthecap.com, Carolina's going to save $3.35 million by cutting Dane Jackson before June 1. The dead money will be $2.5 million. Which means the team cap space, when doing the math right now, should now be $28.69 million. And there are still plenty of ways for Carolina to open up some cap space. We talked about that on the show yesterday, how they could open up some cap space, like extending J.C. Horn, like extending or going ahead and doing it again by restructuring Taylor Moton and cutting players like Dane Jackson, like Shai Tuttle, and like Miles Sanders. So we'll see whether that happens. We'll actually talk about Miles Sanders and Chateau a little bit later on here on the show with the weekly Friday mailbag. But Dane Jackson, he's gone. And of all of the potential roster cuts to save money, this was the most obvious. JC's probably going to get extended this offseason. Dane's not your top guy as far as he's not your top overall corner, as we already knew, but he's not even your second corner on the outside. That was Mike Jackson. And yes, he is a free agent. We'll see how that plays out. He'll probably get to test the market. When you look in the interior at the slot corner, that nickel spot, Shaw Smith-Wade took the job from him. So Dane Jackson did not have a spot in Carolina. He could not win the outside corner job, could not win the slot corner job, and now he is out of a job here in Carolina. Wish him the best of luck wherever he ends up in the NFL. Talked to him after the game in Munich. It was nice to see him back healthy, and also Jordan Fuller, two nice guys that I hope for the best moving forward, but will not be here in Carolina, most likely for the both of them, as Fuller still is, he's going to be a free agent. So we'll see what they decide to do, but I would imagine he's probably going to be gone. Now, the Panthers did announce some staff hires on Thursday, as well as they've hired Renaldo Hill as their secondary coach, AC Carter as their outside linebackers coach, Keyshawn Colmon as an offensive assistant, and Kevin Peterson as a defensive assistant. And looking at Renaldo Hill, he replaces Burt Watts, who was formerly the safeties coach here in Carolina. He has since been fired. He has not been hired anywhere else thus far. And then Carter replaces Tim Lukabu, who was fired but has been hired by Liam Cohen's staff down there in Jacksonville to fill the linebacker role as the linebacker coach. I'm not sure whether he's going to be outside linebacker coach or whatever it's going to be, but he's going to be the linebacker coach, one of them at least, down there in Jacksonville. Looking at Hill and Carter's bios, Hill had a 10-year career playing in the NFL at safety, including stints with the Cardinals, Raiders, Dolphins, and Broncos. Got into coaching back in 2012 in the college ranks. It has been in the NFL since 2018 and when he worked with the Dolphins, and also spent time with the Broncos and Chargers. Well, Carter was a quality control coach with the Broncos back in 2022 when Gerald Vero, Panthers DC, was their defensive coordinator under the former head coach Nathaniel Hackett. He joined the Rams following year and spent the last 2 seasons there as assistant defensive line coach. So I'm assuming that he's going to work obviously hand in hand with Todd Wash, but he's going to be focusing more on the outside linebackers, which need a ton of help after what we saw the last 2 seasons there defensively, as Lukabu has been working with that group. Additionally, 3 current staffers have new titles now. That's offensive assistant Mike Bercovici is now assistant quarterback coach and pass game specialist. He replaces Nathan Carroll, who departed. Mayor Chidari is now an assistant linebackers coach, and Jim Caldwell is now the senior coaching advisor. Another thing to look at, Kevin Peterson, who is named a defensive assistant, is also a former NFL player, played at corner. D'Angelo Hall was also let go by Carolina. At least they parted ways, and he's still trying to find a new job. I would imagine that Kevin Peterson, who, again, played corner, would fulfill that assistant cornerback role once all those roles are clearly defined, once we get later on to the offseason. Maybe they've already been defined by those guys. But as far as the Panthers put out in that article on Panthers.com, this is where things stand with the coaching staff. And it's a big year for Gerald Vero. It's the final year of his contract, 3-year deal. It's a big year for all the assistants coming in. And for Carolina, where you got your quarterback, you got your offensive line pretty much intact coming back this upcoming season. There's not a ton of excuses on the offensive side of the ball not to be competent every single week, especially the way they played in the final 9 games of last year. Now, looking defensively, you got JC, you got Derek Brown coming back. Your linebacker spot's probably going to be fine. Just got to figure out you can find a pass rush and what other holes you can fill in that defense, and to get from being one of the worst defenses in the history of the NFL to being just an average defense. Like, that's all I think a lot of people are really asking for, and all that's probably needed in the NFC South coming up this season in 2025 for Carolina. So we'll see what Gerald Vero and his staff do, but they needed to make some changes. They made these changes. They did not make the change that people wanted to see, and we'll all find out whether Dave Canales made the right decision by sticking by his guy. And if quite possibly that comes back to bite him in the ass, because if you stand by your assistants and they don't work out, well, typically you get to fire the assistants and then keep your job. Maybe that won't be the case. Not putting him on the hot seat at all, but I'm just curious. Tepper, volatile kind of person, never rule anything out. I think Dave's probably fine either way, as long as they continue on the trajectory that they were continuing on, or at least they were headed towards to finish the season back in 2024. So those are some of the updates with the coaching staff, and Dane Jackson no longer a Carolina Panther. It's Friday. So let me go ahead and answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions right here on Locked On Panthers. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Dane Jackson's no longer Carolina Panther, and the Panthers have made some staff changes, but that's not what we came here to talk about on a Friday. Came here to talk about your weekly Friday mailbag questions, and you can get those in for next week by either adding me or DMing me over on Twitter, on X, whatever you want to call it. And hell, if you want to at me on Blue Sky, I'm over there too, at Julian Council. I don't usually post there. I got to do a better job of doing that, but also kind of don't post on Twitter that much. It's a cesspool. People are kind of a-holes a lot of times, so don't spend too much time up there. But if you DM me, and most people DM me and they come correct, which is always funny to see. And they're in your mentions, they're jerks. In DMs, they're cool. So DM me, at me, whatever you want to do to get those questions in on Twitter, X, Blue Sky, whatever it is. You can even DM me on Instagram. People have done that before, at Julian Council, across the board. But starting off today with Devin, who asked, what do you think about bringing back Haason Reddick? He had a down year, so he won't be that expensive. Yes, he did have a down year, and he had a real fumble of the bag this past offseason. He was in Philadelphia, wanted more money, and I understand. He had 27 sacks in 2 seasons with his hometown team and the Philadelphia Eagles. Was a Pro Bowler both years, but they decided, nah, we're not going to pay you. We're going to move on. And they went and traded for the Jets pass rusher and Bryce Huff, and that worked out, as obviously the Eagles won a Super Bowl. Now, I don't think Bryce Huff remember what happened, though. I think he got hurt, but whatever. But they moved on. They won a ring. Unfortunate for Haason Reddick, who's from Camden, New Jersey, across the river, to not get a ring for his hometown Eagles. But he instead went up to New York, and he said, nah, you know what? I know I'm new here, but I'm going to need a new contract. Because if you have not noticed, 27 sacks last 2 seasons combined and 2 Pro Bowls, I want my money. Joe Douglas, show me the money. And unfortunately, Joe Douglas was not willing to do that. And it was one of the weirder situations where Reddick was traded over there, refused to show up for OTAs, which are voluntary, mandatory minicamp, which is mandatory. He said no. Training camp wasn't there. It wasn't until halfway through the season when he finally had a rework deal. They gave him some more money, and he came back, and it yielded nothing at all. As Robert Saleh was fired, Joe Douglas is fired, the Jets have a new coaching staff, and Haason Reddick is no longer going to be a Jet, as he had 1 sack. 1 sack last season in 2024. Prior to that, in the 4 seasons that he played before that, he had 50.5 sacks. That's his 2 seasons in Philly, his 1 season in Carolina, we had 11, and his last year in Arizona. So he had been one of the top edge rushers in the NFL. And looking over at Spot Track, Place for Contracts, his market value this offseason is a 1-year, $11.6 million contract. And hell, when he's been healthy, that 11.6 is going to be $1 million per sack. I would be interested in that. I do wonder if Haason Reddick I always try to be sensitive about this because, this is their livelihood. It's a business. I wonder if he's, humbled himself after this whole situation because clearly didn't handle it the best way. And then when he got out there, he didn't produce. And the Jets overall were just a complete dumpster fire this past year. And, when the hell are the New York Jets not a dumpster fire, if we're being honest? I would wonder if he maybe would take less, but he has been, when he's played a full season, been healthy, he's been one of the best edge rushers in the National Football League over the last 5 years. So 11 mil, you give him, hell, the contract that Panthers gave Clowney last year is one of the comparable contracts that Spot Track had up there. I would have rather prepare. You look at what they gave Clowney last year, I would give Haason Reddick that, and I bet you he would actually hit the benchmarks that Clowney could not hit this past year and probably won't hit this upcoming fall if he stays on a roster, which I expect will be the case. So, yeah, I'm down for Haason Reddick reunion. I still think the Panthers should be looking to go out there and, like, if they want to sign Reddick, start him and Clowney, one of them's a backup who can be an 8-sack guy, and then you draft like Jalen Walker or you draft Mykel Williams, whoever they prefer there at 8. I like that edge rushing group. You got a dude who's been an elite guy in recent memory, a dude who's really never been that, but he's a solid player and a good edge setter when stopping the run, kind of a situational dude. Like, I would bring in Woodham and have him in pass rushing downs opposite of Haason Reddick and take Clowney off the field. And then you can have Jalen Walker, Mykel Williams come along. Like, that is a dramatically improved edge rushing group, I would think. And mainly because you would have Haason Reddick. And I have no idea what the rookie would do. I know what Clowney's not going to do. And I'm not quite sure what William will do, but we could see. So I would love to see that happen. Fred, he's asking about another edge rusher in Carolina. He's asking about Joey Bosa, who is a cut candidate for the Chargers after playing 14 games in his healthiest season since 2021. If he is cut, it means the market is low enough that nobody is willing to give up compensation for him. I know he'll likely have the pick of the litter, but do you think But do you think Carolina could swoop in and get him on a reasonable deal? Okay, well, the Chargers, if they cut Joey Bosa, and this is why he is a cut candidate, and when I'm looking at this, what's the conversation that they're having? They can save $27.3 million against salary cap if they cut him between now, February 21st, and March 12th, which I'd imagine before 4 p.m. Eastern time on March 12th, as that is the beginning of the new league year. He has a $12.36 million roster bonus due on that March 12th. So if they wait until after to trade or cut him, they only save $13 million. So I'm guessing they're going to cut him. There's $25 million. Maybe they can find a way to bring him back, but like, I don't know, man. I don't know. And he's getting up there in age. So they might be a team that says we're good there. He played in 14 games, he being Joey Bosa, of course, after only playing in 14 in 2022 and 2023, combined at 5 sacks and hasn't had a double-digit sack season since having 10.5 back in 2021, which Fred mentioned was the last time he had a healthy season. And there's only been twice in his career where he's played all 16 games. 2021 played 16 out of 17. That's good enough for me, honestly. Like 15, 14 games you play that. That's pretty good considering just the physicality of this sport at the NFL level. He's been a 5-time Pro Bowler, including last year where he made the Pro Bowl again. So, yeah, I would be in on Joey Bosa just like I would be in on Haason Reddick. Now, I would prefer Haason Reddick. Now, I do wonder, considering that Ejiro is far more focused on his edge rushers being able to set the edge and stop the run, which is why Clowney was here last year. I would wonder if Reddick is somebody that he would want. I would think Bosa probably would fit more of that mold in this defensive scheme, even though I think Reddick has been the better player in terms of what Carolina's probably looking for. Now they need to be able to stop the run. I do think that Derek Brown coming back helps. If maybe they bring back Shaq Thompson, that would help. I don't think that's likely as far as the Shaq part of things. But yeah, Joey Bosa, like I've heard you out, Fred, and I'd be cool with it. But he's been getting paid a lot of money. You go over to the cap.com and look at some of these contracts that guys have as far as edge rushers in the NFL. And we go to what's his APY, and Joey Bosa has been making, where is he at on this list as I'm looking? He's been making, his APY is $20.1 million per year. So yeah, he's currently on a $40 million contract that gives him $15 million total guarantee, but he's been getting paid, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, top 12 defensive end money. Are you going to be able to give him, I don't know, $15, $17 million per year? I don't think he's trying to drop down that much, if we're being honest here, y'all. So I don't know if it could be reasonable for Joey Bosa. At least I don't know what you find to be reasonable, Fred, but I don't know. Not sure. Okay. Like if you're going to go out there and get somebody, obviously like Myles Garrett, who you'd love to get. I think Reddick, that could work out too. Maybe it'd be less. I don't know. Maybe not. But both those guys I'd be cool with. Just very curious what the price actually would be and will be if that comes to pass. So we'll talk about that down the road. But right now, I'm in on both of those guys potentially being Carolina Panthers in 2025. Take a quick pause, come back and answer the rest of your weekly Friday mailbag questions right here on Locked On Panthers. Back here on Locked On Panthers, the weekly Friday mailbag, couple more questions. And these next two are pretty similar as far as what they're asking. And actually, I think one of them answers the question in a way. Jake is asking, saying, been following your position reviews and am interested by your willingness to bring back players like Shai Tuttle and Miles Sanders on rework deals. What do you value more, continuity and players understanding scheme, or resetting the culture and replacing players that have underperformed on bad teams? Would love your thoughts. And then Mark asking, how do you think the Panthers can improve their depth? Last year, they carried a number of players and special teams that were unable to help on the field when the injury bug hit, that being Sam Franklin Jr., Felipe Franks, Chandler Wooten, and Lonnie Johnson, to name a few. With only 53 roster spots, everyone needs to contribute. Yes, I agree. So, Jake, my thing, and I looked at every single position for those folks that have not watched or listened to the shows. Go back. I talk about quarterbacks, running backs, everybody, offensively, defensively, all of that. Give a state of the offense, state of defense heading into free agency. So go back and listen to those episodes on YouTube or in your podcast feeds. I did say, though, when looking at Shai Tuttle and Miles Sanders, where also on my offseason to-do list with cutting Dane Jackson is to cut those two players. The difference, though, with Dane Jackson and the rest of them is, like, Dane Jackson, you're saving $3.35 million, and he's not someone, when you looked at how he performed past year, that fits in this room. Like, he lost his job to a rookie. He lost his job mainly because of injury to someone they traded for, Mike Jackson, who could have a role here in Carolina next year, again, as the number 2 corner. You look at Miles Sanders, like, he's going to be a backup, of course. They can save $5.25 million. You look at Shai Tuttle, they can save $3.275 million if they decide to cut him. But I go to the question that Mark is asking about, how can they improve their depth? They can improve their depth by bringing in better players to start, and then guys that started the last couple of seasons can be backups. And we kind of saw that where Chuba Hubbard won the job over Miles Sanders. Sanders became a backup. The Panthers brought in another player in Jonathan Brooks, who, of course, was not healthy. But the depth there overall at the running back position was improved. Now, unfortunately, Brooks, again, wasn't healthy. Sanders also missed some time. And Carolina had that game in Tampa where they had, like, no running backs at all. And then once we saw Miles Sanders back out there in Week 18 in Atlanta, you saw the quality of the depth that they had in having Miles Sanders, a former Pro Bowler, an experienced running back who was brought here to be the number 1 guy. And why I would like to see Miles Sanders come back, Jake, is for that reason. You're not going to have Jonathan Brooks maybe for the entirety, at least the majority of this upcoming season in 2025. You know what Chuba can do. You know what Miles can do as well, as far as being a backup and coming in and having a start like he did in Atlanta. That makes your running back room better. That's why I like it, and that's how you improve depth, Mark. And then you look at defensive tackle. Like, Shai Tuttle's not been good for the Panthers. He really hasn't been good the last couple of seasons, even before coming to Carolina. You have Haason Robinson coming back. You got Derek Brown coming back from injury. If you sign someone like B.J. Hill, or you sign Javon Hargrave, or somebody, Puna LaFleur, to come in and start there like a true nose tackle spot, I think that new nose tackle combined with Derek Brown and with Haason Robinson can be a solid trio up front. And then behind him, like, think about the other guys. Like, LeBron Ray was not good. Like, Nick Thurman was not good. Deshaun Williams really wasn't all that great. Now, Tuttle obviously wasn't much better than those guys, and sometimes worse in situations, but he's been a starter in the NFL. Why would you not want him, who's still younger than Deshaun Williams, come back and just be a depth piece? Like, that's how your depth improves. So you can improve it by keeping guys who are already under contract as dudes who are backups, and then bring guys in to start ahead of them and be able to have a 2 deep where you have both a guy who's starting for you and has starting experience, and a guy who's behind who has started before, who can step in. So that's why I value that. And so you talk about too, Jake, what do I value more, continuity and players understanding the scheme, or resetting the culture? Well, we did see with the culture this year that if you're not performing, you will lose your job. Jordan Fuller lost his job to Monty Richardson. Dane Jackson lost his job to Shaw Smith-Wade. Dudes lost their jobs because they weren't playing well enough. We saw that this past season. We saw the way that things turned around, where they can go and get embarrassed against Tampa and then come back that next week against Atlanta and play their asses off. Like the culture, it's been reset. It's changed, and you better perform or you will lose your spot in Carolina. That is very clear. Cole now asking a question about the draft. What would be a good return for the 8th overall pick look like in a trade back scenario? And does any team currently have enough draft capital to warrant considering a move like that? I looked over at the draft value chart, and they have the 8th overall pick worth 1,400 points in the 2025 NFL draft. So just looking at a scenario possibly in a team that may have willingness just because of the relationship that Dan Morgan has with that team, Seattle. The Seahawks right now are drafting 18th overall. That would put Carolina in range to get, I guess, like a Mike Green from Marshall, or maybe a Kenneth Grant from Michigan, something like that, if they want to go that way. Even maybe Michael Williams. I've seen so many different mock drafts. Like I was watching SportsCenter the other night, and Booger McFarland was talking about Jalen Walker making sense to Carolina there at 8. Same thing with Matt Miller, who was up there talking about that with Kevin Nagandi. So it seems like Michael Williams is more of guys who can get drafted in the teens. We'll see how that works out. Either way, if they wanted to trade back and get more compensation, they could trade back to 18th with Seattle. And that 18th overall pick is worth 900 points, So still 500 more points you got to make up. Seattle also has their second round pick, which is number 50. That's worth 400 points. So they get you up to 1,300. And they don't have another pick that's going to be worth 100. So you could also get their 4th rounder, which is number 137. That's worth 37.5. And right there, that's 1,337.5 points that you're basically putting into that 1,400 points as far as the draft scale goes. So you would necessarily not win that trade as far as that goes, as far as the points go, but it feels pretty fair to me that you move back and you pick up a second and you pick up another 4th, which then would mean that Carolina in this scenario would have the number 18th overall pick, the 50th overall pick, 57th. So that's 3 picks there in the top 60. They would have the number 74 pick, which is in the 3rd round. So they'd have 4 picks in the top 75 of the draft. Then they would have 110, which is already their pick, 113, which they're getting from Dallas in the Mingo trade, and then 137 from Seattle. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 picks in the top 140, 150. I mean, that's not bad if you think about it. So that could be a scenario where if they trade back, like that's kind of value that you're looking for, where you get back in the teens and then you're picking up another 2nd rounder and then a 4th rounder as well to match up that value chart. So that, I hope that answers your question there, Cole. Andrew, final question here on the mailbag. He asks, would you target all defense in the draft or most picks, or target free agency market and get some difference makers who can have an impact straight away? Depending on the position, kind of went over this over the last couple of weeks when looking at both sides of the ball. Like free agency with offensively, like quarterback, they're set there. Running back, I think because they drafted Jonathan Brooks, you would want to bring in a veteran backup at the vet min, of course, which should be federal minimum wage. Unfortunately, it's not. It's a lot more than that. But still, that's what I want to do. I'd rather get a veteran like at running back to back up Chuba Hubbard. It wouldn't be fine with Miles Sanders coming back, as I mentioned earlier. I would rather do that instead of draft another running back, especially with Chuba under contract the next 3 years, and with Jonathan Brooks still having time to come back and maybe be the guy down the road. Receiver, I could be talking to drafting somebody. I kind of would rather them obviously go get someone to elevate the floor who's already been a productive receiver in the NFL, and also like to find somebody who can be really raise the floor and be that top guy. But I don't know how likely that truly is. Tight end, they're going to have to go. They could draft somebody. Tyler Warren could make some sense. I've seen some people out there who have been saying that. I've seen it also on mock drafts. That could make sense. They do need to sign another veteran tight end anyways. Offensive line, that's going to be a veteran. I don't think they're drafting anybody. Defensive line could be down for them to draft a defensive tackle like Mason Graham. If they get later on, Kenneth Grant can make some sense. Looking at Walter Nolan as well, possibly if they would like to do that. And then like linebacker, you could draft. I wouldn't mind them drafting. You look at corner, draft could make sense. Bringing back Mike Jackson or just getting a veteran. I think both of those scenarios make the most sense for you, doing both free agency and a draft there. Corner, safety, they could draft somebody. I do think free agency is where they're going to go. So typically you want to fill holes in free agency. You don't want to build your team via free agency because those teams, they don't win. Like the Titans were a team that were doing that last year and they're picking number 1 overall. The Jags did that a ton of times. And how many times are they drafting the top 3? A lot. So if you want an instant impact guy, you probably need to get that via free agency. But if you're trying to build this the right way, you want to focus on the draft. Like edge rusher, you probably want to focus on getting someone who can be a long-term dude, especially at a position that is so pricey in today's NFL. So, yeah, it's kind of where I stand right now. I don't think going all defense like in 2020 makes a lot of sense. But obviously trying to hit some of those needs and getting best player available is kind of the mindset right now for me and kind of the mindset probably for Carolina. All right, it's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast for our Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe or follow the show free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter at Julian Council, where next Friday I'm back answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding it. Next week, it is the NFL Scouting Combine up in Indianapolis, which means we're going to talk about what right now are the biggest draft needs for the Panthers on Monday. Hopefully going to get on our Locked On NFL draft expert sometime next week. Also, maybe get somebody on locally to talk about what's going on. And we're going to hear from Dan Morgan and we're going to hear from Dave Canales. So a big draft week for the Panthers on here on Locked On Panthers next week. And I'll talk to y'all on Monday.